This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Experts in the Wire, episode 114. Claudia Higgins. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 114 of Experts on the Wire. This was a great conversation I had with Claudia that took place in Boston at TechSEO Boost 2019. Claudia is an SEO Insight Technology Manager for Argos. They are a very large retailer in the UK. She's spoken at a lot of really great SEO events like Brighton SEO, SearchLove, and C3 New York, in addition to TechSEO Boost. In this episode, we talked about a lot of really great stuff, including how she does SEO for a big retailer, what an SEO Insight Technology Manager does, how to use PPC to strategize for SEO. We talked quite a bit about managing a lot of data using tools like Power BI, etc., and something that they call the data Hulk. They actually even have some data around if they saw that click-through rate impacts rankings. So that there's some interesting stuff there. How you strategically deal with holiday and seasonal content. And then finally, we talk a bit about how to communicate SEO value to executives. So I hope you enjoy episode 114 of Experts on the Wire with Claudia Higgins. I want to jump in, and can you tell us a little bit about your background? Because as I learned a little bit offline, you didn't start in SEO or really much technical related or website related. Your background is in art, correct?
Yeah, I've got a strange background where I've always been into art. I then went to university for being a primary or elementary school teacher, which it turned out I was much more into learning than teaching. So that lasted 1 year. After which I did a tattoo apprenticeship and started temping at the company I now work for in the product information team as a copy proofreader. And I actually fell into SEO because I wanted to get a mortgage, and I was a temp and a self-employed tattoo artist, and so I kind of went for wherever the vacancy was. And this was 2014, and I'm still at the same company, I'm still in the same team. And
do you remember the first time you heard about SEO? I don't remember when I heard about what SEO was, but I remember when I knew I wanted to do it full time. I was listening to the SEO 101 podcast years ago, and I realized these are two people doing SEO full time. I hadn't realized that before. I just thought like everybody just put SEO into their website. So is there a certain moment that you remember sort of discovering?
I learned what SEO was in order to apply for a role in the SEO team in order to get a permanent job, and it was pure luck that it ended up being something that I had a real affinity for, and I was excited to have a permanent job, and I got stuck in, and the more I learned about it, the more I realized there was to learn, the more I realized that I was good at it.
And about what
very gradual.
Yeah, what time range was that for you?
Probably the first couple of months of being in the role, I would say. That just really feeling like I took to it like a duck to water, and it felt quite intuitive, a lot of the concepts of it early on, and just being able to measure it. Yeah.
One of the best questions anybody ever asked me, I thought, was how had being a musician helped with my SEO? For you, how had being an artist, or how has that helped you with SEO and the work that you do?
I'd be interested to hear what you have to say about being a musician as well. I've been musical since I was very young as well. Started piano lessons at 4 and used to play oboe in orchestras. So I think that's probably had an impact on the way that my brain works. But I think just that creative, from a music point of view, I think there's something about learning it's a kind of code that you're, particularly if you read sheet music or understanding a set of rules in terms of keys and chords, and that you work within, but you're not constrained by.
Right.
And there's a lot of kind of creating. For me, I work best as an artist and as an SEO, when I understand the parameters and I have to have a creative solution to the problem that's in front of me. So being at art college, if they said you can do anything for your project, I froze because there was nothing for me to bounce off. Whereas if they said, it's going to be based around this stimulus, or we'd like you to create a book, then I'd probably create something kind of weird for a book. But because I had that concept of book to center my thoughts around and to bounce my creativity off, that was when I really flourished. And it's kind of the same with SEO, and particularly the area of SEO that I'm heavily involved with, the insight, that it's about having a problem in front of you and needing to think differently about it in order to come up with something new, because there's so much creation in SEO because it changes so much. There's no template to follow. You have to try things and you have to come up with things to try, and that's creative. That's inherently creative.
I like the having parameters answer. My answer was similar but with a twist. So I find that music taught me how to connect right brain, left brain, be creative but also analytical, math and science and art and creativity. So that's where I really found music helped. I do want to chat about what your role is. It is kind of a unique, very specific role in the world of SEO. Real quick first though, tell me a little bit about the company that you work for. A lot of us in the US might not even be familiar with this company.
So we are...
in the name.
So I work for a company called Argos, which is a retailer in the UK. It was founded in the 1970s. It's a high street retailer that was based around a twice yearly catalogue launch, where you get a big thick catalogue, all kinds of different categories of product in there, and then you could go into a store, and rather than have all of the products there available for you on shelves for you to pick up and then take to the cashier, you would have another catalogue, a laminated one, and some little slips of paper. You would find what you wanted from the catalogue, write down the code for it, take it to the cashier, pay for it, and it would be brought to you from a warehouse attached to the storefront. So it's quite an unusual proposition. And that concept and that model it's hard to explain the place it has in British culture. But certainly for me as a child of the mid-80s, my Christmas lists for Father Christmas each year would quite often be me and my sister lying on the floor with an Argos catalogue, writing page references and codes to send to Father Christmas for what we wanted. And there's a comedian called Bill Bailey in the UK who have always referred to the Argos catalogue as the laminated book of dreams. And actually we've lent into that this year with our Christmas catalogue that's come out, and it's called the Book of Dreams on the front, and he had his own personalised one created for him. Did you ever think as a child you would then be working for them? No, not in my wildest dreams. But it's strange to look back now and think that what I do on a day-to-day basis is so linked to such a major part of my Christmas as a child. Particularly around this time of year, where it's kind of talking about that internally. How does that translate for the 21st century? A couple of years ago, the product development team created like a wish list app for children in the run-up to Christmas that kind of mirrored that experience that so many of us had when we were little, of doing the same thing. But we've had an online presence now for a long time. I think it was very early 21st century. We were doing e-commerce as well, and that kind of click and collect model it ties in so well with how we already worked as a brand we were kind of one of the first in the UK to do that. So essentially we're talking about a large scale e-commerce site. Like I think you described similar to Target in the US or something. And what is your role in the company? I'd really love to dig into this because I think it's probably a pretty unique one. So when I first joined the team, I came on as like a general SEO practitioner, entry level. And after a year, became an assistant manager in the team, was a bit more involved in dealing with senior stakeholders, running the team with my manager. And a couple of years into that, a new role was created, which was SEO Insight and Technology Manager. It's now been shortened to SEO Insight Manager, but the responsibilities are the same. And at the time, it was created so that we had somebody who was in charge of making sure that when we're looking at our enterprise site analytics, that what the data that we were pulling, the metrics, the dimensions, the reports, all represented SEO performance, that we could get to answers as quickly as possible, to do technology reviews, see what tools we were using, whether we were using the right ones, and really kind of shape the strategy for how we managed insight and data for SEO, which has become increasingly important over the years. Just to have any credibility as a team, you really need to be able to know that you're focusing on the right stuff, be able to measure how well that stuff is performing. Also, things can change overnight with SEO. There can suddenly be a new algorithm update, and being able to use our insight to diagnose any sudden site changes is so important, just in order to be able to keep our heads above water in terms of being credible in the eyes of our senior stakeholders.
And I do in a moment want to dig into what some of those metrics are and the real fun stuff on that. However, set the context of the rest of the SEO team, because I do want the listeners to understand that what you do is a very, very specific role. Like you're not actually doing the SEO in terms of trying to improve rankings or like that sort of thing, right? You're focusing very much on the data side of it, right? So
very much.
What does the rest of the SEO team sort of look like?
So we've grown our team a lot over the last few years, and by growing it a lot, I mean we've got 3 extra people. So we had 3 when I started. We had up to 4, but going back to sort of 2016, we had 3 people in the team. We're now up to 7. So my manager, Dan Patmore, is the senior SEO manager, and he oversees everything to do with SEO for Argos. And that includes relationship with our agency, the organic agency in Exeter, down in the West Country, beautiful part of the world.
So you have an outside agency
We
as
do,
well?
yeah. It's like a small agency, but they're basically an extension of our team. We've got, I think, 3 of them full-time on our accounts.
And what is the quick sidestep? What's kind of the benefit of having that outside agency? What do they provide that maybe isn't internal, or just the benefit there?
I think a lot of it is that they, being part of an agency that works with a range of clients, they've really got their finger on the pulse of what else is going on in the market, in the UK search landscape, where we tend to be very focused on our own website, which is by necessity. It's also great to have that perspective in everything from shaping our strategy for the next year or more. And they're also providing a lot of support for us in terms of helping to educate the rest of the business on SEO. So weekly they will travel a few hours up from Devon to come and spend time at our office, run a drop-in session for anybody in the business who has questions about SEO, run SEO 101 courses for people who are new to teams, so that they've got a basic understanding of what SEO is and how it intersects with their daily work. And then just general support for our team, that they've got expertise in broader areas of SEO than our team quite often does, just because of the size of our website, that we tend to be involved in on-page optimization, internal linking, but probably less experience in dealing with product development and site speed and more of the technical stuff. I always tell companies, even if you have internal SEO help, you can always get an outside consultant, even just a one-time thing, just to review what you're doing. Absolutely. Because as a consultant, we have that perspective of seeing all kinds of sites and situations. Now, back to the actual data and the metrics. So I'd love for you to paint the picture sort of like your day-to-day. Are you pulling data, crunching data, analyzing? Like, I'd love sort of that day-to-day, what your sort of work entails. And then I do want to dig into the actual metrics and the thought process behind, why to analyze certain things, etc. So one of the things I love about my job is that I don't really have a day-to-day that that I could say is a typical day. And so quite often what I'm doing on any given day is tackling a question that has come up either as part of a change in performance or something that somebody senior has heard about and wants to know, how does voice search affect us, for example?
Interesting.
Or I might be using Power BI to create something that helps to visualize things for people in other teams, or to aid us in our reporting, or to aid us in understanding what we should be tackling next. Trying to diagnose which part of the site is receiving less traffic and why. Just setting up reporting for particular events, so for Black Friday, which we've just survived, being able to really understand what's going on there, or just trying to push forwards with the data strategy that I've set out. So one of the things that I'm really keen to be able to understand better, that's been on my hit list for years now, is the intersection of paid and natural traffic for our site.
Right.
So getting data from the paid search team and just finding ways of understanding how PPC impacts SEO and how we can get the balance right and really get the most benefit from using both of those channels.
So using something like, how does voice search affect us, as an example? What's the thought process behind working through that problem? How would you approach that?
So the first thing I did when this question came up was to look at what data and research is already out there. Understand whether there's anything that Google is giving us through Search Console or anywhere else that gives a clue as to which queries were asked by voice. None, it turns out. They're not giving us anything. And so then it's kind of looking at what else is being spoken about in the industry. What are the people who have already done some research on this done? So a lot of the stuff that I'm doing is standing on the shoulders of the people that have come before me, even if they come before me by 2 weeks,
Right.
But just getting that perspective. And then coming up with hypotheses about how voice search might be affecting us. The thing with voice is that you've got people dictating into their phone and then seeing a regular SERP. But you've also got people using things like Alexa or Google Home and receiving verbal responses to their questions. So kind of separating those two was the next stage in that. Understanding, is there a way that we can start to understand the characteristics of a voice search that results in returning a SERP on a mobile device? You can't. It's interesting because I think the automatic assumption with that is that it's going to be more natural, that it's going to be spoken questions. But I think that's also influenced how people search when they're typing, is that I know that I do it, knowing that Google is capable of answering questions that I phrase to it, that I don't have to put in the exact keyword that I want to receive back in my answer, means that if I have a question, I'll sometimes just type that question out verbatim into the search box. 9 times out of 10 I get what I'm looking for. So I think we have to be careful that we don't go, if it's phrased as a question, it's probably a voice search, because I don't know that that's necessarily true. So in some cases I have this hypothesis, but I don't have any data to back it up. And that kind of has to be the end of it, because for me to have credibility and not just be making things up, you kind of have to go, this is what it points towards, but when we get there's no data. So that's as far as we can go with this at the moment. In terms of looking at verbal responses that you get back from something like a Google Home, Google Nest, I think they've rebranded now. The hypothesis there was that where you appear for an answer box for a linked query, you would be more likely to be cited in the response back from Google. So there were some questions about if you wanted to buy something, what would it, if you said, I want to buy a paddling pool, what kind of response would Google give? And then also if you asked questions where we knew we were appearing for answer boxes. So a lot of time there was spent with me taking some data about where we knew we were appearing for answer boxes, sitting in my living room and having one-sided conversations most of the time with a Google Home Mini. And there was some correlation. We found that if you said, I want to buy a paddling pool, then you quite often would be given directions to the nearest places that sold it. So if you appeared in local packs, more likely to be referenced as a place that somebody could go and buy a paddling pool.
Yeah.
If you said I want to buy a paddling pool for delivery, you still got those local results. So there's still some teething problems with that. And there was some correlation, as I said, with the answer boxes.
Yeah.
And it's small sample sizes, and it's kind of anecdotal, but it did kind of give us the steer that the way that you optimize for voice is the same as you would optimize for rich results. That it's going to be about using schema, about using markup, and really making it clear to Google what you've got on your page, what the content is, where you're relevant, where you're the right domain to be appearing in those rich results. And that was the guidance we gave back into the business, was there's not a huge amount of data about this, but this is where we feel that it's going.
So is part of what you try to do come up with insights that will then help inform the SEO strategy?
Yes, absolutely.
I see. And is that what you're working through on the PPC versus SEO, or how that influences side of things too?
So with that, we did some work a couple of years ago. I was trying to prove that the SEO team should not be bidding on the term Argos, because we rank number 1 through 10.
Yeah.
So our click-through rate was very high, and it was basically just throwing money where 90% of the traffic would be wouldn't be incremental.
Right.
And so being able to look at our click-through rate, looking at the incremental click-through rate, looking at what's the CPC if you only distribute that across the incremental clicks, looking at whether it costs in, it was a really useful exercise for me. The next thing is to look at more broad brand terms, Argos Sale, Argos Toys, Argos TVs, Argos UK, for example. Some that are very close, some that are a little bit more category intent, perhaps.
Yeah. Yep.
And understand what the interaction is across those. But then you start coming into the much more complicated, looking at non-brand. So for our huge number of clicks that we get across both channels each week, understanding which search term drove those clicks, understanding what having an Argos result in the paid ads at the top does to the click-through rate of the natural result below, how ranking impacts that, how competitors' ads impact that. It's very, very complicated. There's a huge amount to take into consideration, and I'm not, at the moment, I don't really know how I'm going to approach it, but I know there's a lot of data, and that makes me excited to just get in and start playing.
Did you hear there's an anecdotal study that I say anecdotal because the study wasn't anecdotal, but I cite it as something that I heard through two or three sources down the chain of, I believe, GM shutting off PPC ads for 2 weeks or something. I'll have to find the actual resource and put it into the show notes. I'm kind of making stuff up here a little bit. They shut off their PPC ads for 2 weeks, and then they lost 30% of their organic traffic, is what I always say.
Yeah.
I think the general spirit of that being, it sounds like PPC ads, and this is the hypothesis perhaps, running those increases clicks on organic. Is that the hypothesis?
Yeah, I can see why. I think there's two sides to it, that you can, either having another link to the same site appear higher up the page means people are more likely to click that one than your organic result. I've definitely heard the hypothesis that having the same domain appear multiple times, whether having multiple organic results, as we see occasionally, or having an ad at the top and then an organic result further down, can just that repetition can increase click-through rate.
Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of things to think about when we have a look at that. I think we tend to see more of the first scenario. Again, this is just from being in the team for several years and having a sense of what happens, and being aware that PPC have probably amped up their bidding because we're seeing a drop off in the CTR. I think but it may be that we haven't noticed when we see an increase in CTR when they've turned on. So there's definitely another aspect there.
Is one of the fundamental questions you're trying to answer is, should we run ads on these keywords? Is that kind of what you're trying to work towards? Potentially,
and also I think there's some good questions that you start to get stuck into is, should we, because these keywords are expensive,
Right.
should we be focusing on those from an SEO point of view, prioritizing those? If we can get into the top 3 positions for these expensive keywords, does that mean that PPC don't have to spend as much money there? And conversely, if we drop out of the top 3 positions, for example, for some high profile keywords that drive a lot of traffic for us, can we trigger some extra spend in PPC to react to that, so that we're really making sure that we're getting squeezing the most value out of having both running concurrently?
That's really cool. So it's like using the cost per click as a prioritization for
Absolutely.
keywords to potentially go after. I can imagine that could be quite useful on such a large site with so many options.
Especially if we can automate that, even if we're automating a report that then is actioned by a human in the first instance, that if we can kind of trigger some things when different rankings change. I guess the other thing that could be really useful is that for PPC, you'll get data about how well each keyword converts.
Yes.
And that can be another metric that we don't have a view of. We can see from our on-site analytics how well people convert when they arrive on that page from Google.
Yeah.
But we can't see which keywords drove that.
Right.
Whereas PPC can see it all the way through. So understanding which of their keywords have the highest conversion rate can also help us with that prioritization.
Yeah, that's great. So sort of in a workflow or sort of practical sense, are you essentially going to build out like a database of data?
Essentially, yes. So one of the things I've been doing over the last year or so, having seen a talk at C3 2018, is getting into using Power BI.
Yeah.
And I have started from absolute ground floor on this. It's been started off with processing data in Excel and then loading that data into Power BI because I didn't know how to process data in Power BI, but I knew that there was a way of linking it.
Right.
And that concept from the talk I saw by Will Reynolds, it just triggered something in my head that I was like, we've got all this data from all of these different places.
Yeah.
I think he used paid data in his demonstration. I'm only now getting to the point where that's something that I'm incorporating. But even just having that, joining up the data that we've got. So Search Console will tell us, here's all the keywords, well not all of them. Here's a load of keywords that your website received clicks from. Here's how many impressions you got for them. Here's how many clicks. This was your CTR. This was your average position. And then we don't know what happened next. Whereas an Adobe Analytics will say, here are all of the pages that received clicks, received entries from Google, from organic results. And here is how many orders each of those pages received from those visits, and here's how much revenue. So being able to say, to use Power BI to say the URL that is referenced in the Search Console data, you can match that with the URL that's referenced in the Adobe data.
Right.
So you can then look at a URL in Power BI and see a list of all the keywords that drove clicks to that, and in what proportions they drove clicks to that. How much of it was branded traffic, how much was non-branded. And then you can say, right, well, we've got our tracked ranks for us and for our competitors. If our highest ranking URL for that keyword matches the URL that we're looking at, I want to see which keywords were ranking, where they were ranking, where our competitors were ranking for those same keywords.
Right.
And gradually you start to be able to take all these disparate data sets from all of your different tools and give yourself a way of seeing that data all at once. So one of the things that I'm the most proud of having created in my role is what I call the data Hulk, which is so cool because it takes the data and it smashes it together. And I'm a big Marvel nerd, so it just seemed ideal. When I finally get onto doing a bit more data science, it maybe is going to be called Professor Hulk.
So for the listeners, just to sort of sum up what we've talked through so far, because I think it's really valuable stuff even for myself. So my role as an SEO consultant is I don't have really the bandwidth to do all this data crunching and analysis, and I wish I did, but I think we can all, no matter what our role is in SEO, we can all take and learn from this and maybe try to apply it where we can. So even though I don't have the time to sit around like crunching data, I could still understand the concepts and do it in a smaller way. So it sounds like really what we're doing is it starts with a question, maybe a question from an SEO team or an executive, and then you basically, like from there, you have to decide what data to collect.
Yes.
And then what I'd love to chat now about for anybody listening, because like I know and the listeners are aware of like, okay, I have Search Console over here, I have AdWords over here, I have my ranking data in that tool, and you mentioned Power BI. So how do we start to pull this all together? I want to get a little technical or tactical.
Okay.
Like, so describe what it actually is that you do to pull the data together. And a little bit of this is just, I don't really know exactly how Power BI works, and some of the listeners might not as well.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So I am not using Power BI in the most sophisticated way, which I'm comfortable with. I know where my next steps are going to be, and it gets into more kind of using things like BigQuery to store my data and to reference it from. But what I do is I have a folder, and in there are all my source documents. So I'll have one that's called Adobe this week, one that's called Adobe last week, and the same for Search Console, and the same for Outrank data.
And a source doc's just an Excel sheet, or?
Absolutely, it's CSV or an Excel doc.
Okay.
And then within Power BI, I will load the data in from those. And in order to refresh it, I'm changing the data that's in the source file and then just hitting refresh in Power BI. So on a weekly basis, I'm extracting that data from the separate tools, I'm pasting it over last week's data, and hitting refresh in Power BI.
Okay.
And then so on your initial load into Power BI, you can then do the transformations that you might need to do on your data. So just clean it up a little bit. If you've got parameters that are creeping into your URL, you can split the column at the question mark and delete the stuff you don't need, and then group it by URL so that you're deduping but keeping all your data.
Similar to what you can do in Excel or Google Sheets.
Absolutely. And then the next part that you do is create connections in the model.
Okay.
So you're then saying, well, here's this table, here's this other table, URL here is equivalent to page here, create a relationship. So there's some teething problems that you normally go through where you need unique values in both of them or one of them, and there's a bit of playing around there where you say, I thought I removed duplicates, and you're still saying there's duplicates, and there's lots of kind of just frowning at the screen for a while. But once you get it working, you then have a situation where there's a map in Power BI of the different tables of data that you've loaded in and the links between them, so you can start creating indexes of dates, for example. Or one thing that I've done that's really useful for linking together unique values. So looking at Google data, for example, you may have more than one URL against a keyword and more than one keyword against a URL.
Oh, right. How do you deal with that?
In order to get those into unique values, just concatenate the two.
Okay.
Copy the columns, merge them together with a space in between, and then that becomes my index.
Oh, I see.
And then you can deduplicate by that.
I see. Cool.
And kind of use it as a key to then link against other stuff. And then once you've got all that there, you can then start playing with the visualizations. What do you want it to look like? How are you going to get this across? And you'll get your dashboard. And so, for example, you might have, just describe exactly what I've created now. At the top, I've got a table that has URLs that have been receiving traffic from natural search with all our site data on there. How many entries, how many orders, how much revenue. I've also created a metric in there which is revenue per click. So rather than just have average order value, it's average click value, for example.
Revenue per click. Now, that's not native in analytics?
No, this is literally revenue over clicks, so that we can say, on average, how much is a click from Google to this page worth?
That's pretty valuable.
So it's an interesting way of sorting it that kind of combines conversion and average order value into one kind of very broad but still indicative metric. And then clicking a URL in that table will filter the rest of the page so that you're only seeing the data for that URL. So say it's our Black Friday page. What I've got underneath there then is there's a table of all of the keywords that were driving clicks to the site from Search Console, how many impressions, how many clicks. And so clicking that URL in the top filters that table so you're only seeing the keywords that drove clicks to that URL. And then I've also got like a tree diagram, so you can really visualize what proportions those clicks were being driven in. And then you can also, from there, see just the keywords that were ranking with that URL. How has that rank changed week on week? How have our competitors' ranks changed week on week? Did we lose 2 positions because Amazon gained 2? Or have we all lost a little bit? So maybe there's a different kind of result type sneaking in there, some editorial.
Yeah. 2 things strike me as I'm hearing you describe that, what I think is all really wonderful. It was a great description. One is, my naive mind is saying, well, can't I just do all this like an Excel or a spreadsheet? Like, it sounds very spreadsheet oriented, so I'd love to hear the value out of a Power BI or other similar things, by the way, for the listeners, like Tableau and stuff, right? So this is not just limited to Power BI, but a type of program like that. I'd love to hear what the value add is of those versus just Excel as a number 1. And then, what was my number 2? Let's talk about that first. I'm sure I'll remember the number 2
So,
after.
when I was doing the panel here yesterday, I had a bit of an epiphany that I've talked a bit about my background and the career. It's not really a path. I definitely was like walking there with a machete, finding my own way. But how that actually shows through in what I care about now. And so the kind of teacher side of me, I think, has been trained and has a knack for taking complex ideas and being able to communicate them to people who aren't specialists. And then the artist side of me likes making things that are attractive and communicate clearly with visualization. And so what I'm doing with Power BI is that I'm using those 2 concepts and creating something that I can put in the hands of, for example, the content team, so that they can look at the URLs that they're responsible for. And they can, if they're going to be making changes to it, they can click onto it and they can see these are the keywords that are driving traffic to this page. I need to make sure that whatever changes I make, I preserve the relevance of those keywords, because that's where our traffic is coming from. Or they go on and they say, we've lost relevance for this keyword. What can I do to boost that? Because obviously it's something that used to be driving more clicks for us than it is now. And so it really, where we've spent a lot of time in our team working with people around the business, educating them in SEO and encouraging them to make SEO part of their everyday work. What that's done is it's given them a huge amount of hunger to be able to do the research themselves and to be able to measure the impact of what they're doing themselves. But they also don't have the kind of time that even in the SEO team, that we would love to have, to be able to do really thorough research on every single thing that we do, going into Search Console, going into Conductor or whichever rank tracking tool you're using, going into Adobe and running things through there. And so they know the stuff. They conceptually understand. They know what they need, the information that they need to have in order to inform their decisions. But that time requirement for them to go into each of those individual tools and do that research, particularly when you can kind of draw conclusions from one data set, go into another data set and find something that doesn't correlate with it. You then have to work out which data set you were going down the wrong track in, and double back, and people give up. So by creating this tool in inverted commas, that people can just search for the URL that they're interested in, click it, and have all that information surface to them in a really easy to understand way, but also all at the same time. It really helps to speed up those processes and reduce the time from that question part that you were talking about earlier to the action, by just getting those insights just streamlined and presented easy to read.
That's excellent. And the second part that I remembered was, what also strikes me about this is some of these questions that you might ask the data, like how did Amazon's ranking affect our positioning? That is sort of unknown territory for myself and a lot of people. Were like, I did not even think necessarily to ask that question, but now it seems like you have this ability to combine all this data, so it's almost like whatever question you can imagine, like your imagination is kind of the limit of what you can ask and then learn from that. One thing I've heard Will Reynolds mention is looking at how billboards affect search behavior?
Yeah, he's
and
got
things
off
like
on
this?
some amazing tangents.
Yeah, and then
Interesting
one area I'm fascinated with is how television advertising affects, and radio and podcasts, like all these channels that you can't directly attribute to search, but they show up as brand searches and things like that. So for myself and the audience, I'm curious if any other sort of these like more imaginative or less, common questions come to mind that you've also looked at and pulled data for.
So one thing that I'll just mention before I move on is that what's an unexpected benefit of creating this dashboard or the set of dashboards for people is that because I'm creating that link in the data, if a question comes up that the dashboard isn't set up to answer, I can create a new dashboard within the same document and take advantage of the data that's already all linked in there. So someone can ask me something that doesn't quite mesh with how things are visualized.
Right.
And I don't have to recreate all of that. I can just do a save as and get rid of a load of stuff and build something new, but based on the same model of linked documents. And so that's been something that's been really useful just for being able to get to answers quickly, even if they're not questions that I was anticipating answering with that. In terms of things like understanding the impact of offline, so TV ads, for example. A question came up at the end of the panel yesterday to do with our Christmas advert. So our Christmas advert launched at maybe about 3 weeks ago, and anyone who hasn't seen it, which is probably everybody, it features a grown man playing drums on a child's drum kit, and with all the stage lights and everything. And a little girl comes downstairs and she's drumming as well. It's very cool. If you Google Argos Christmas advert 2019, it's up on YouTube. And we had a question from the brand team: can we understand the impact that launching that TV ad has had on searches? And we were, it's not going to be the best way of doing it. It was kind of short notice and we had to pull something together. We mostly used Search Console and just looked at what was having the biggest step change in terms of interest and impressions. And so drum kit came up a lot. Lots of drum related keywords suddenly kicked in for us. Lots of Argos Christmas. Argos term itself saw a bigger week on week increase, although obviously with it being November, things are ramping up for Christmas gifting stuff anyway. But you can definitely see the ideas that our offline stuff puts in people's heads that then goes through their keyboard or their voice search and brings them to our website. I think we sold out the drum kit in a few days.
That's cool.
So at the moment, it's very much relies on them telling us that they're doing something, us knowing a bit about what it is that they've launched, and looking for things that have changed trend that are likely to have been impacted by that. But I think there's going to be some smarter ways of doing that in the future that I'm quite excited about.
Yeah, and I do want to chat a little bit more about communication and sort of, as you said, using the technology to empower the other digital teams in the business. But real quick first, just I'm curious if you ever looked at click-through rate and its impact on search ranking. Was that ever a question that came up?
We haven't done a huge amount of studies in it, but as a rule, our view of it is that it impacts ranking. One of the anecdotal things that we've noticed is that we sell jewelry, but in the jewelry market, we are not as thoroughly associated with high quality jewelry and that kind of. I think as a company that sells everything from nursery furniture to sports supplements to fancy dress costumes to wardrobes.
It's not Tiffany's or...
Exactly, we don't have that same kind of cachet in terms of branding for jewelry. So we tend to see that if, no matter what optimization activity we do for jewelry, we tend to appear and then quickly disappear from page one or from higher positions.
Oh, wow.
And it's a competitive market and there's all of that stuff involved with that. But the sort of working hypothesis is that doesn't matter if we appear because people don't click through to our website as much as they click through to the results around us because they don't associate our brand with that product or with a high quality product.
Yeah.
We actually do some really nice jewelry, but we're not associated with it. And so anecdotally, that's kind of our working. So testing things like meta descriptions has been done in the past, and we've seen some improvement in CTR and some improvement in ranking, but quite often there's other things going on at the same time that you can go, well, we've definitely seen an increase in CTR, so that's great, and we're ranking a bit better. We haven't been able to conclusively tie those things together, but there's definitely a strong instinct that they're closely related.
Yeah, that's very interesting stuff. So in terms of empowering the other digital teams, you mentioned like a quick example a little while ago about having somebody be able to just have a URL, like the content team, go in and look at data for that. So are you empowering them by giving them this sort of raw database of stuff that they go in and run a search or something? And is that part of what Power BI is doing? Or are you also doing like charts and reports and that sort of stuff?
Kind of depends. We've got a bit of a multi-pronged approach on this. So as I mentioned earlier, we've got our guys from the organic agency who are coming in and running some SEO 101 courses, and that are available for people to go and ask questions to or email questions to throughout the week. We've then got things like Power BI where they can look at specific pages and understand what's going on there, although there's limitations in the way that I've set it up at the moment, that it's kind of a quick snapshot rather than a trend. We also changed our rank tracking, our main SEO software a few years ago to Conductor, who I mostly selected due to the ease of use and the user friendliness of their interface. They have a live chat box. It's going to sound like I'm selling for them, but we've had a lot of engagement in other teams. We wanted something that we could educate people on and say, here's all of the insights that you can get from Conductor, go and play with it. And for them to not be faced with a screen of proprietary tool names. It's broken up into like explore, report, all of these like verbs of things you might be wanting to do. So that's been another big part of it. But just really working much more closely with those teams, particularly our event planning team and our content team. The people in our teams in the SEO team have really close connections with those and are helping prompt content that maybe could fill a content gap, or working closely with somebody who's managing the Father's Day page, for example, and saying, well, this is what some of our competitors are doing. Could we have this in the H1? Because that's really going to boost us for those kind of tabs. And really working closely with them. Because the great thing is we have shared KPIs, and that's always the easiest way to engage people and to get them involved in SEO, is to show them what's in it for them. You know, they're creating content, they want people to see it. And if we can show them how they can really get more eyes on it and boost their metrics that they're measuring the success on, it's much easier than saying, do this because Google will like it. Apart from anything else, we have more data on what users are interested in. We can talk about, if you do this, it will be great for you and it will be great for us, but we're also saying we have loads of data about users. Like, this should be forming the basis of what you do because you're creating for users.
And you mentioned the event planning team. I'm curious what their interest is in SEO, and how data can help them. Because when I think about events, you rarely think about SEO for events.
So when we talk about event planning team, we're talking about the digital execution of those events.
So like it tends to be things and
so it's our subdirectory, argos.co.uk/events, and everything that sits beneath that. So it's going to be Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, Father's Day, but particular pages that are set up. We do Diwali and Eid and all kinds of wonderful holidays from lots of different cultures. So there's quite often, it's either going to be curation of products and ideas and articles that the content team have written. It might be something like a January sale or Black Friday, which is going to be much more offers driven. But just working with them to work out what should their closing page look like when the event is over, when they start updating it for the next year, what should they be including on there? Which data should be refreshed? Which data should be repurposed?
Yeah.
So which content should be refreshed and repurposed? And what should they be linking to? Where should they be asking to be linked to, from? And just really working with them to make sure that if somebody searches Mother's Day in March for us, but I think it's different in the US.
Yeah.
That we're on the results pages.
Yeah. How are you using data to help determine, I think you said, what should be on the page when it's over? How is data informing that? Are you looking at?
So we're looking at trying to maintain ranking for the keywords that have been driving traffic to us.
I see.
So we're saying, rather than just say the event's over, or even worse, take the page down and then put it back up again, or take the page down and create a new one the next year that's not on the same URL.
Yeah.
All of those kind of things are things that we've needed to educate people in the business on, just to say,
right.
Let's keep it there year round. Let's look at what we can have on there. Can we still link to that content, even though it's not that time of year? Maybe we're not linking to this page as much from other places on the website, but we could definitely still link from that page into some other places that are going to show the relevance.
Right. So you're using this data to empower that event team to make their content better, to make them rank throughout the year. So this is literally coming down to like the words on the page that it should say. How do you make those decisions? Like, are you looking at what other sites are doing that rank throughout the year?
Definitely. There's some competitor analysis that goes on. The people that received for domains that received a large amount of click share over that period, what does their closing page look like? Are they making the most of the keywords that they were relevant for before? How can we maintain our association with those keywords for the 11 months of the year that people aren't coming to our website on those terms?
Yeah.
And just making sure that we're always, every time that event comes around again, we're building on what we had the previous year rather than rebuilding what we had the previous year.
Right. When I think about the linking decisions, normally I just make a really good judgment call. If there's a timely page, when I'm working with a client. So what are the more detailed nuances that you're looking at besides just somebody like me going, yeah, I think you should link to it because it's great if users can find it all year round. What are the more detail-oriented things around that?
So there's still a lot of that human judgment with that kind of thing. Actually, data can tell you a lot about a lot of things, but just that intuition, when you know your website really well, the intuition about where there is a natural link between pages, between the purpose of pages, where you could place links that will not feel spammy. A lot of that has to be human decisions, and as much as I'm a massive proponent of using data in everything that we do, I think that data sometimes it helps you form your overall understanding of what your customers want, what your website is good at. But then that is taken as context sometimes for judgment decisions. And I think that's a really important aspect of it, that being familiar with your data doesn't mean you have to be a slave to your data. You can use it to just cumulatively improve your understanding of your website and how it performs in all of these different ways, and then make informed judgment decisions.
Do you, or are you ever asked to pull crawl data or log file data against pages?
I haven't been doing that so far. It's definitely another area that I'm interested in incorporating. We're partway through onboarding with Spotify at the moment, so I know there's loads of stuff that they've got that would be really interesting to pull into models where we can look at everything about a page all at once.
Because one thing I'd be curious about with the seasonality stuff is how smart is Googlebot? Are they hitting the Mother's Day page in October? That's what I'd want to look at. Is like Googlebot that intelligent, where seasonally they might adjust their crawl. Might be interesting thing to look at. So that's going all in one direction. So that's helping the digital teams, the people doing the work and the implementation. What about in the other direction, when you get questions and you need to show things to executives, etc.? How do you generally go about doing that in your work? Are you building, visuals and presentations and?
Yeah, so the way that we have always worked in the time that I've been in the team is that Monday mornings we come in early, we run a bunch of data, and then it kind of, I would say cascades is the wrong word to use here because it goes upwards, but it used to be that we would combine our reporting with that of the rest of digital marketing when we sat with them, and then the digital marketing manager would go to the head of digital, and that would all get combined and distilled into a kind of clear message that essentially made its way up to the C-suite. And so that's still how we work. We've now got more data sources than ever, and in the last few months the team's been working. One thing I really wanted to do was to make sure that it wasn't just a couple of people in the team who were able to do that. So we now have what we call the war room, and everyone has a different role. We come in at 7 a.m. By 7:30 we have pulled the most important, like the headline data from each of those. So from Conductor, it may be how many of our keywords were ranking in positions 1 to 3, in positions 4 to 10, page 2, etc., and how has that changed week on week and versus the last 4 weeks, etc. For Adobe, it might be how many visits did we have, how much revenue did we drive this week, and what does that look like week on week, year on year, and so on for other data sources. And then we all get together and we'll write all that stuff up by hand on a whiteboard and say, what kind of week has this been? What are the questions we need to be able to answer on this? Where do we need to investigate a little bit more? If things are looking good, what's making them good? If things are looking a bit worse, do we need to panic? What's making them look bad? Have we lost visibility in areas that we care about? And then everyone goes away and does some more investigation. And then that is then written up into a commentary that really reflects that week. It's no longer as templated as it's been in the past, that we don't kind of go, and here's this, and here's this, and here's this, and just kind of list these top line metrics, that we're actually saying, this is what this looks like, and this is why we should care, and this is why you don't need to panic. And that's really useful. You kind of get to know what the executives care about, and tailor your commentary to help them go, right, I get it, and move on to somebody else and ask them the difficult questions.
And that feedback loop is important. I'll never forget, a couple years ago I started with a client and I just ran a simple competitor overlap report in SEMrush, and they have that really basic chart, which is a Venn diagram showing your keyword overlap and then the competitor and then your keywords. And they always called it the Death Star because their competitor was like 9 times as big as their circle, but that one silly chart sold more, or helped push along the fact that they need to do SEO more than anything.
Absolutely.
Are there particular types of visuals or, designs or anything like that you see that helps convey things to executives, especially along the lines of like SEO metrics? I think a lot of people listening want to know, how do I communicate either the value of SEO or how good SEO is going? What sort of charts and visuals help with that?
So we tend to do it very verbally, actually, now that I think about it. On those Monday mornings, it's, the commentary is delivered in a couple of paragraphs, and it doesn't tend to be supplemented with visuals, which is maybe an oversight, but it's quite a verbal. It's a meeting of 6 people in a room, and everybody kind of describes how the week has gone. In terms of how we, putting aside the visuals bit for a second, in terms of how we get that buy-in, data has been super important to that. It's been a long-term thing of being able to answer questions quickly and credibly. And we had a terrible summer about 4.5 years ago, where things were going down and to the right, and we didn't really understand why, and we were struggling to get to the cause of it. We didn't at that time realize that a lot of our competitors were having a similar issue. But we lost a lot of credibility internally, that people say, what's going on with SEO? Why is SEO suddenly down? And this was coming off the back of mobile becoming a big thing. So we were always up year on year because people are using their mobiles now as well as their desktops. So our traffic is just growing and growing and growing. And suddenly we kind of hit 2015 and that kind of natural growth was tapering a little. And there were some fundamental issues that we had with our site that I won't go into, but that were definitely dragging our performance. And we were so used to these sunny days of incremental traffic that we weren't set up to really scrutinize what was going on. And so from that point of like August 2015, I've got all these files on my computer that are like, big crisis, August 2015, of like me in Excel doing like, is it this, is it that? From that point, we have worked really hard to make sure that all of the insights that we feed back into the business, into senior stakeholders, are accurate and fast, and that we're clear about what we're looking at, we're clear about what we're not looking at, we're clear about what's important and what they shouldn't worry about. And we've just gradually built that credibility up over time to the point that now, if we say that something is necessary, or we say that something is not necessary, or that something should be stopped, or that something should be expedited, we have a huge amount of authority, that we're trusted, and that maybe we will be asked to show why. But if we say something needs doing, people pay attention because we have got a track record of being right, of identifying where there's problems with data that other people are using.
That's good. And that's very different than being an outside consultant and coming in, and you have to very quickly try to earn that trust.
Yes. And one of the things, I mean, just recently, an example I can think of that for me was very much about being authentic and being credible, was in the run-up to Black Friday, the PPC team saying, and we haven't been bidding on the term Argos because you asked us not to. Are you sure that you're going to be able to capture all of this traffic? Because we were bidding quite a lot last year. And us looking at it and saying, PPC on that term is not very incremental. However, over Black Friday, the amount of interest in that term means that that small degree of incrementality is worth a lot of visits and it's worth a lot of revenue. So even though it's going to damage our click-through rate, so when they turned on, our click-through rate dropped from 82.5% on that term to less than 40%.
Okay, your organic click-through rate?
Yeah. Our organic click-through rate for our brand term dropped from 82.5% to less than 40%.
Did that all go to the ad? Wow. Yeah,
so we saw a combined click-through rate increase, and there were hundreds of thousands of extra clicks that came through to our site because PPC were turned on.
You got more clicks overall.
Exactly, but it damaged our numbers that we.
Yeah.
So it was something where we looked at the numbers and went, do we advise them to do this? This is going to look terrible for us. And you just had to go, yes, it's the right thing for the business. They're paying 1p per click.
Right.
Went to some senior stakeholders and said, the PPC team have asked whether they should turn it on. We are actually going to say, yes, we think they should turn this on. Because there's incrementality there that, on an average week might not be worth very much, and that money could be better spent somewhere else. But for the amount of interest that we've got at this time of year, it's worth it. That small percentage of a very large number is a decent sized number.
The decision that it's worth it is because of the extra amount of clicks, or is there a revenue then tied to that as well?
There's a revenue tied to that as well, but just on the basis of the clicks, we were able to justify the decision.
What do you think is happening? Like, if you are not running an ad and somebody Googles your brand, you would think all those clicks that would have gone to the ad all go to the brand.
You would.
And why do you get more clicks overall with both of those?
I think there are a few factors. One thing that's quite interesting is that the day before they turned on the PPC activity, we took a bit of a drop in our CTR for that term. So they went live on, say, Friday. And the Thursday, we dropped 7 points CTR. It was quite a big click-through rate
And this is a brand search?
This is for the term Argos, exact term, nothing else on there. We went from about 82% down to about 75%. And then they kicked in, and our overall one was high 80s. But my suspicion is that because of the timing Black Friday, we had a lot of editorial sites, affiliates targeting that. So even if they weren't outranking us for that term, there's a news carousel, or there's a Twitter feed, or there's more rich results that are maybe drawing people away, that they search Argos, and then above the organic results there's a news carousel. We know some stuff about their Black Friday deals they're about to launch, or how to get the best out of Argos Black Friday, whatever. So I think the changes in the SERPs at times like that can siphon off some of our traffic, and I suspect that there's stuff like that that's causing that.
Did you see differences in mobile versus desktop click-through rate changes in this sort of like ad, no ad testing?
We haven't looked at CTR broken down by device at this point. I think as we do the wash-up for Black Friday, I think we're speaking now beginning of December, so we're just getting into that wash-up period. I think that's going to be something important. During the campaign itself, we were monitoring the results manually, so just doing incognito Chrome searches and seeing what they looked like, and certainly just looking at the vertical number of different types of results on there. Mobile, we're seeing a huge amount more in terms of rich results. We were seeing for terms like, I think, Black Friday sales, we were seeing 4 ads, a shopping result, an answer box about what date Black Friday is. We were seeing a domain agnostic news carousel. We were seeing multiple results for the same editorial domains. So you'd see telegraph.co.uk and then immediately below telegraph.co.uk as well. And they were always next to each other, which was interesting. But then you'd also see for maybe 5 of those domains that were on page 1, they would have their own news carousel of all of the different articles that they'd written about Black Friday. So you'd have telegraph.co.uk, and part of their organic result would be another news carousel. So we had up to 6 news carousels.
Wow.
And then 2 answer boxes, and 2 people also searched for, and all of that page result. And so my suspicion is that when things start getting noisier, you're getting more rich results on mobile than you are on desktop. We didn't see at any point on desktop a news carousel for a particular domain. It wasn't a thing. But we were seing it daily on a couple of different high-profile
There's a lot of stuff going on in those mobile SERPs.
It's changing so much.
So we're going to wrap things up in a second, because I think they're also going to take this room over. Tell the listeners where they can find you online, your profiles, etc., and then again the company.
Of course. So the company is Argos, argos.co.uk. If you want to have a look at our Christmas ad, it's quite a fun one this year. You are very welcome to follow me on Twitter. There's not a lot of SEO on there. There's quite a lot of me being very upset about UK politics, or tweeting my favourite comedians, or posting drawings that I've done. But I'm at Claudia Faceoff, my roller derby name, so ClaudiaFaceoff. Feel free to follow me. There's a lot of nonsense, but it'll be fun to have you there for it.
Awesome. Well, Claudia, thank you very much for joining us on episode, I think that was 114 or 15, I'll figure it out, of Experts on the Wire, and we'll talk to everyone next time.
Thank you for having me.